fluorinated water calcifying my pineal gland. I'm going to sleep good tonight. Thank God Big Brother's looking after my dental health and, trying to destroy my brain. We've got special guest Tim Wilms on tonight. Absolute legend. How are you, Mr. Wilms?
I am good, thank you, Dusty. Ready for another Thirsty Thursday. So we are definitely streaming onto your channels. We're also streaming to my Wilms front, YouTube and X.
I hope we're streaming onto my X. I'm pretty sure I've done it correct this time. Working out the magical, yes, we are, the magical restream what we're using. I think it's pretty bloody good, to be honest. I love it.
Except it's just not ready to rumble, pun entirely intended.
Yeah, it would be awesome if it let us stream to Rumble. Rumble's getting neglected right now for me. And it's sort of like, I would love to be there because it's a little freedom of speech home for people. The more of us who use it, it just creates a bigger, better environment for everyone. And for all the new guys who want to start like streaming and just speaking their mind.
Exactly. Make sure that you put up the comments. You know how to
check out this we haven't got any comments yet, but please, anyone in the comment section, drop a comment. We'll read your comment out. If you're really keen to come on the stream and we'll give you a minute rant or anything like that, you just let us know and I can send you a link, a live link, and you can jump on your phone and say, Dusty, mate, I'm drinking a VB4X or whatever tonight. What are you drinking tonight, Tim, you legend?
I am about to crack open a Bilson's vodka fruit tangle. So this is one of those sweet vodka free mixes that the New South Wales Liquor Authority they released some draft guidelines. They wanted the power to ban these sorts of sweet drinks because apparently with their fruity taste, they are appealing to minors, even though the legal drinking age is 18. I remember the Teal Independent for North Sydney, Kylie Tink, she lobbied for Hard Solo to change its name to Hard Rated because it could appeal to minors, because obviously Solo is a very popular lemon beverage, even though, of course, Hard Solo you can only get in a liquor store.
Yeah.
But I was glad that the New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, he tore up those draft guidelines and said, let people live their lives, and said that I think we can manage and moderate the risks of underage drinking without wiping out or stopping adults from making their own decisions in their life. And he recently, Chris Minns, allowed public drinking in New South Wales parks and also on the beach. So he's a refreshing Labor leader.
He's a true binge drinking champion. Like, I grew up in the era of binge drinking.
Oh yeah, I was able to in my youth get through a whole bottle of vodka in one night at a party.
Did you spew your guts up? Did you know if you hit the bottom of that vodka bottle, you're like, I'm gonna spill?
Obviously I felt bloated the next day, but most of the time I didn't shunder. That's that's the old Aussie slang.
Mate.
But there's no way I could do it now.
Yeah, no way. You grow up and you're like,
but yeah, Kevin Rudd, who was the Prime Minister at the time, his bright idea was the Alco-Pops tax, because that's, of course, the nanny state solution, either ban or tax. And he also flirted with the idea of raising the drinking age to 21. which thankfully didn't happen. But the Alka-Pops tax passed, and sadly, it's a local Victorian brand, Bilsons. It's in administration at the moment, and I think that if we want to completely reverse the nanny state, should get rid of the Alka-Pops tax and also cut some other liquor taxes as well, because Jimbo, Jim Chalmers, the treasurer, he thinks that us drinkers don't notice when he indexes the alcohol tax every year, because of course it all keeps going up.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, to get a schooner of beer. So before COVID, you could go to the Victory Tavern in Brisbane City. It was delicious. It's like a working class blue collar pub. It's good, great bar. You could buy a $10 jug of beer and you'd be set. I'd often like rock up. I'll be like, here you go, boys, 2 jugs of beer on the table. And like by the time everyone's drank them, other people are buying jugs and topping you up. Next minute, you're like catching the train home and you're like, fuck, I spent $20. It was insane. That was like 4 years ago. Now you can't get a schooner in this town. Can't get a schooner for $10, let alone a jug. So, you know, and then I don't know what happened to, like, I remember delicious Woodstock cans. The blue or the silver or the gold Woodstock cans would send you to, like, you'd turn into a bloody animal on that shit. Many good nights I had and very horrible hungover mornings.
Oh yes, you definitely feel it for the next day. You sort of need the next day off. But I remember the last time that I was drinking and also downing shots as well. I think it took me 3 days to fully recover.
Yeah, like I'm like, what do? We poured a slab for people would probably know Dave Pallo, the guy who was recently, what was he, taken to some human rights court or something.
Yeah, the complainant though, he in the end didn't get his complaint in for the next phase on time.
Yeah, so it's all over now. It's wrapped up. And Dave, the guy tried to whatever. I don't know if it's sue him or take him to some human rights thing trial. And
Queensland
for
Human Rights Commission.
not doing a welcome to country. He wasn't happy with what Dave said about welcome to country. Dave said it was animalistic, which the technical term is like the worship of ancestral spirits or the spirits of animals. So it was like, technically it's kind of true what he said, but anyway, I helped Dave Pallo pour a slab on the weekend, and I was like fucking bit sore Monday. Must have caught some virus from my boy, daycare virus. It wasn't that, like, I just felt buggered Monday, and I was like, I'm on the waters.
We're in the 11th
taking a night
wave.
off on the beers, even though I don't really drink often anymore.
We're in the 11th wave of COVID.
I'm on the 11th wave of COVID. Never jabbed up. Never got convinced to jab up. Too much of a free-spirited,
Yeah, we've got there was the launch of the mRNA Victoria plant this week at Monash University. 100 million mRNA jabs a year. My good friend, Dr. Clown, he releases music parody videos about COVID, and you could probably see if you can find it, although he also goes by the name of Media Bear. That's his channel. He did a song, mRNA, to the tune of YMCA. mRNA, it's gonna change your DNA.
Did you jab up, or did they force you to jab up, Mr. Wilms?
I got the AstraZeneca two jabs, which is not mRNA, it's a viral vector. And yeah, I was one of the lucky ones. I remember I watched that, I think it was produced by Stu Peters, died suddenly, and a lot of it's quite graphic. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's all the embalmers, like at the the morgues, like they're taking out all of the veins and that and all the clots in them. And I was like, phew, I was lucky.
So people got messed up on the jab you took. Like it's a documented.
There was blood clotting, but obviously with the mRNA ones, Pfizer and Moderna, there was myocarditis, pericarditis. I know a number of people who did get that and ended up in hospital, and all the like at the hospitals, the doctors and nurses, they knew what was going on, and it's like, have you had the jab? But it was all covered up at the time because the politicians were saying safe and effective.
Tim, you had a full head of hair before you had the jab, eh? And
I'm not going bald. Why are you hiding behind a hat? Let's see what's underneath. Are you covering something
This
up?
is my Aussie chiller hat, which is sort of like Australia Month is coming up. So this is sort of the Hayes Media he created. He made this like awesome meme of dudes saluting the Aussie flag, and they're like, some of them are wearing this hat, some are kind of wearing a flat kind of looking hat. So this was the Australian made hat that we sort of like, oh, let's all get that. So I've bought this hat in preparation, and it's like, it's designed to be wet. You're supposed to dunk it in the swimming pool, have it soaking wet, and wear it wet. That's the hat's designed to keep your head cool. Good evening, Bogans. Oh my goodness.
I think we're on the victory path in the War for Australia Day, given that, well, they call themselves the Australian Venue Company, but they're owned by China. Decided they get in early with their bagging of Australia Day, saying we're not going to celebrate it, and then they sort of had a statement of regret, but
I'm blaring you out with the music on that. Mute it. That's my little Stone Cold giving the flipping the bird. But yeah, here's the statement, Tim. Can you hear me? I feel like I can't.
Yeah, I can hear you. That's really tiny, so our audience won't be able to read it.
What does it say? Yeah, this is the sort of statement that they said. I don't know if we should.
Can you read it in like a effeminate voice? Can you do that?
Oh,
like, because they have a DEI policy, so
I've got to transdimensional it up. I'll try read it like a normal, semi-illiterate, retarded bogan. That's a part of the diversity spectrum, like the disabled, the mentally retarded. Aussie Venue Co. We can see that our comments on the weekend have caused both concern and confusion. We sincerely regret that our purpose is to reinforce community in our venues, not to divide it. Well, you fucking did, you idiots. It is not for us to tell anyone whether or how to celebrate Australia Day. Well, you did. We acknowledge that we apologize for our comments. It certainly wasn't our intention to offend anyone. We employ 9,600 people across the country. We also welcome 15 million patrons each year to our venues across our community of team members and patrons. Many different views are held, and we acknowledge that whether you choose to celebrate Australia Day or not, everyone is welcome in our pubs. Always, we have been and are always open over Australia Day, and we continue to book events for patrons. Oh my God, Tim, I can actually read. But yeah, that's sort of like just it's retarded because they came out and said 200 venues they're banning Australia Day, and then they've quickly come out and said this statement. And
how did they think that it was a good idea? I know that obviously there was, and certainly the Albanese government last Australia Day, they thought that they'd win the voice and then they could dismantle Australia Day. And so remember, they allowed the local councils to cancel Australia Day, but I noticed this year that Chris Minns and the Labor Premier down here, Jacinta Ardern, saying, yeah, we celebrate Australia Day. And who was it? Matt Thistlethwaite. He used to be the federal Labor Minister for the Republic. That's been abolished now, and he said, yeah, Australia Day is good. So yeah, Albanese he's shit scared of, and so are all of his MPs, of appearing anti-Australian coming into an election year, because we know deep down that they wanted to change the Australia Day. Linda Burney, the Indigenous Minister, remember her? She always wanted to change it.
That's fucking hectic. I mean, I think we're going to win. I think Australia Month's going to be big this year. People have been messaging me. They're like, Australia Month's happening. And I'm like, yo.
Why not start it now? Australia Months. Since they started early, the Australian Venue Company. What do you reckon about how they just slapped the name Australia on their business, even though they're based in China?
It's a Hong Kong limited company, Tim Wilms.
That's part of China now, basically.
Yeah. Hong Kong's a part of China. I know, it's fucking retarded. We for Australia Month, we've got the British Australian community. I don't know if you've ever, where can we pull up? I could pull up hashtag Australia Month search on Twitter, but the British Australia community actually created the Australia Month logo. And they're going to redo a new logo for this year. It's pretty much probably going to be the same, but it's something now that I'm going to leave it up to them to, if they want to modify it, it's going to be their baby. Because I think it's just they're a great organization. And here it is. This is the Australia Month. Can you see that? That's the Australia Month 2023 logo. 2024, we're going to change it to 2025, or they might modify it slightly. I'm going to leave it totally up to them. The British Australian community is fucking good. Have you ever heard of them, Tim?
Yeah, I've interviewed both of their presidents. Their immediate past president, Frank Salter, who's a scientist or studies human civilization, so he knows heaps about how particular human society interacts. And also, I haven't gotten into this on a show. I should invite him back about why there's in-group racial preferences and why certain races like certain foods, and is really smart. And Harry Richardson, the current president, he took part in our UK general election live stream, which saw the election of Keir Stalin, as he is known, and the Brits are now suffering under Starmageddon.
Yeah, he's an absolute genius, that dude from the British Australian community. I interviewed him. I went to it was called Backpack. It was my latest censored TV episode. And I've been clipping it. I've got so many clips that I need to put out from that. It was incredible. This is a photo of Hayes Media Group. Last year, the night before Australia Day, Hayes Media Group and a few other guys. Gabriel, what's Gabriel's last name? The dude from Australia First?
Gabriel Mare. I haven't seen him for a while.
No,
he doesn't do the streams anymore, but I don't even see him on X. He's the girl that he clearly had a crush on, Freya Leach, a young Liberal from University of Sydney, who's the defender of the Jews on campus. She's on Sky News now.
She's on Sky News, Freya.
Yeah, I could tell just by his interaction with Freya on social media that he so wanted her.
Who wanted her?
Gabriel Mare.
Damn, she's like Jewish. She's her dad. Well, her dad is Mark Leach, and his mum was Jewish. So maybe she's not Jewish technically because it only passes through your mum, right?
Yes.
So she's not Jewish. But anyway, I interviewed Freya at Never Again Is Now. It was the pro-Israel kind of protest they did in Brisbane. And like they seem like there's a censored TV episode about this. And like I was cracking jokes to Mark and Freya, some like cheeky Jew kind of jokes. And they were like, fine. They weren't like uptight, you know what I mean? They were willing to have a laugh and banter, and it seemed honestly like I've been to the pro-Palestinian protest, and they're absolutely fucking retarded Marxists. So it was something I never wanted to get involved in, and then obviously I went to one of each of their protests, and look, the Jews and the Christians were way more inviting to me and friendly and banter and joking around, stuff like that.
Well, the pro-Palestine rallies, they're a mixture of Islamists, Antifa, socialists.
Yeah.
So they're saying, like, most of the whites at those rallies, the same that are at the Extinction Rebellion or at the Trans-Tifa rallies. Like, it's one of their current things, and they adopt the same tactics, such as disrupting events, blocking traffic. So, and they of course just chant the inane slogans that they don't really know what they mean. You know, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Oh yeah, and they're also at Invasion Day rallies chanting always will be Aboriginal land, no pride in genocide.
Because like even Avi Yemeni, like he came to say, get this for an example. Avi Yemeni, I interviewed him at Church and State Conference this year, and he was talking about how crazy these pro-Palestinian people are. He's like, they are absolutely mental, like dangerous attack. They'll attack me. And then he said, I ran into the National Socialist Network and we spoke peacefully, disagreed with each other, and parted ways. Without any spastic behavior. Like, and he literally said the Marxists are way more dangerous.
He was Avi was attacked at that National Socialist Stop Immigration rally by the Antifa Socialist counter protesters. He interviewed Thomas Sowell afterwards, and I noticed that Avi was trying to sort of bait Tom, but Tom, all his answers were considered and calm. But at the end, all the other NSN members, they chanted as Avi left, "Expose Jewish power."
It would be an absolute nightmare for Avi. Like, you reckon this is why he left? Is he gone? And I don't know. He went to America during the election, and I wonder if he was like, Australia's a mess for him in particular. Like, I know. I mean, look, this year has been decent for protests. Brisbane City, great protest, freedom rallies, freedom of speech rallies. Like all the crap. Jordan Ditloff in the chat. What a legend. Jordan Ditloff is actually kicking goals from the Libertarian Party. I should even look him up. I should look up Jordan Ditloff. We could go on a bit of a tangent. But
the Libertarians, they've got a lot of high-profile recruits. Craig Kelly joined on Monday, and then today the Cumberland City Councillor Steve Christou joined as well. So
kicking goals.
yeah, it's good that the Libertarian Party is now the centre-right bandwagon party. Basically, because I think that most of the dissident right, although they like what Pauline Hanson says, they've seen that the party's a closed shop and doesn't have any potential for growth.
Yeah. Here he is, Craig Kelly. Return to politics, joining the Libertarian Party. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, I was a member of the Libertarian of Labor, and I really enjoyed volunteering for Malcolm Roberts and some local candidates. And like the last time I volunteered for a local candidate was Sharon Bell in Ipswich. She got like 35%. It was the biggest chunk a right winger had ever really received in that electorate. But then it was like the Libertarian. I actually went to Dave Pallo's, like I was saying, I did some concreting for him last weekend. I go to his men's group this Friday. We're going to his men's group. Some guys from the British Australian community go. Some guys from the Libertarian Party go. I got introduced to guys from the Libertarian Party invited me to the Ipswich branch. I went along and I was like, this is sweet. Unfortunately, One Nation doesn't have branches, but like you can join your local Libertarian branch and be a part of it. Like I've met, we're stalking Jordan Ditloff's Twitter page. Here's Jordan with something he's doing with Malcolm Roberts. Malcolm is an absolute bloody legend. Pauline Hanson, absolute legend. I love them both. I've met Jordan, interviewed Jordan. I like how open the Libertarians are for interviews, like John Ruddock, Jordan Ditloff, Dunder Viking.
Yeah, I spoke with Jordan at the free speech rally in Melbourne. That was a great rally apart from the weather. We all got rained on just at the end.
Mr. Jordan Ditloff.
How are you, gentlemen?
Good, mate. I should minimize this.
Hi, Jordan.
Hey, how you going?
I'm the one left out without a singlet. I've got.
Yeah, that's it. Look, it's just serendipity that I happened to tune. I thought, look, what's going on? What's kicking? What are the spaces? And I saw Thirsty Thursday, and I thought I've got to be. I'm wearing my bloody training singlet, my Hogweights. So it's Hogweights School of Swolcraft and Liftery. So it's all the different houses, but as lifting stuff. It's pretty cool. It's actually probably the opposite of cool. It's nerdy as fuck, but my campaign team would probably be having kittens if they could see me.
We need you to be a super nerd, but like we need super nerds to fix this country.
I'm that guy. I'm absolutely that guy.
Remember the story how they would be like people used to say like, don't pick on them nerds because one day
nerds will inherit the earth. The nerds are always the motherfuckers that you see 30 years on and they're killing it.
Yeah, so, but the problem is like them people we laughed at for not tying their shoes, they became radical left-wing nutcases and they destroyed the country.
Yeah,
but there are like we've got libertarian nerd power. Not that you're a nerd, Jordan. Like I've met Jordan and like in person. I interviewed you. You're a man's man. You're a good bloke. Like honestly, you know, you've got Dunder Viking in Queensland.
Yeah,
he's got more muscles than you know.
Yeah, look, and I try to leave the muscle pics to Lockie. He's got his niche, but underneath the mild mannered Clark Kent facade that I normally rock around in, I'm hitting the gym. But yeah, look, I noticed in the chat, a few people sort of taking issue with the. Someone saying I'm on two separate streams. Yeah, I was with Oz versus the Agenda earlier tonight. But blue-pilled, definitely fucked up in the past and made some big mistakes. But last night there was a pretty massive achievement and milestone in that rehabilitation where I've been deemed to be a fit and proper person to practice law, which is pretty wild as a journey to have been on. So You know, I'm one step closer to being in a position to repay my victims sooner. And law's a pretty tough club to get into. So they believe that I've changed and that I'm a person that's fit and proper person to practice law. So, but ultimately, you don't have to believe what I say. You can judge me based on what I do, and you know, if you're not on board, that's okay too.
Yeah, it's sweet. It's like the first thing when I interviewed you, you told me your story, and you know how your past, whatever, you ripped off some clients. Were you into drugs or something that you had like an addiction?
Look,
or
that was a big part of it. But look, that was a big part of it. But also, I was just very young. Like I was like 22 when I bought my business. I really had no idea what I was doing, and I was also just a lot of hubris. You know, I wanted to be like a little would-be Lord of the Universe, and wanted to run before I could walk, and didn't want to listen to any advice. And so, just generally wasn't really, shouldn't have been in the position I was in, and unfortunately, other people in the community paid the price for that. So,
but you got charged, whatever, you paid back your victims, and it's like, you know, I'm a Christian. What about, you know, we have a good tradition in the West of repentance. Repentance is like, you know, we always think of this idea of like, oh, you've got to say sorry, you got to apologize. But like apologizing is good. I like apologizing if I do something wrong. But to repent is to change your life, your lifestyle, not continue doing that thing. You're like a poster boy for the idea of repentance. You've shown us this is what I was like. You've absolutely turned it around now. You're champion for freedom and personal responsibility. You're a great role model for all Australians.
Well, like I think I agree with what you're saying. It's really easy to say sorry, but it's a lot harder to do sorry. You know what I mean? And I think there was a time in my life where what I said didn't mean a lot and wasn't worth a lot. And so when I got out of prison and I was sort of starting to turn my life around, I had to really put my values and my statements into action and sort of, really put rubber to the road and show people that I was a different person rather than just talk about it. So that's kind of been my my go for the last sort of 7.5 years. And I never thought
Let's bring on Benny from Australia Talks, because he's probably like
Thursday
he is like the number one interrogator.
Oh, good.
If Ditloff can handle these, like the wit of Benny,
100%.
I think we're gonna Australia.
It's good. But like last night I got triggered.
That's hilarious.
Hey Benny, how are you, mate?
G'day, Jordan.
Yeah, last night I had an hour and a half of like speed dating cross-examination from 4 King's Counsel and 1 retired judge for an hour and a half. It was the most hardcore fucking experience I've ever had in my life. Like they just disassembled me and put me back together. It was crazy. Right. It was not an experience I wish anyone, but it's good they do their due diligence.
The ringer from Australia Talks.
Yeah,
Benny, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm not doing bad. I sound like I'm coming through super loud, so I might just turn that down.
You're too quiet now.
Am I too quiet? Okay. Yeah, I think my missus sabotaged my mic because she's sitting always been on stream. So I think
missus under the bus.
Did something.
You're yelling too loud, bro. So she turns the mic up.
It drops in and out a little bit, but I'll get a new one tomorrow. I'll go buy JB Hi-Fi. But if you can hear me, Jordan, I would just say congratulations. First and foremost, it's a power of work you've put in for a long, long time, several years. It's dedication as well. It's not easy. You had to sacrifice plenty of things to get there. You've proved all the doubters wrong. And no one wants
I mean, not all. There's always going to be some people who sort of I think there's a certain kind of person who doesn't actually want to accept that people can change because they feel like they wouldn't do that if it was them. You know what I mean? There's like I don't know how to explain it, but there is a certain type, like there's a certain small percentage of people who don't believe in redemption and rehabilitation because I think they're quite like they wouldn't do that in the same circumstance. I don't know. That's just the best I can.
Yeah, that's probably accurate. That's how I read them. I noticed that somebody commented under my recent interview of you, oh, did you watch your wallet? Like there's always going to be these sorts of comments underneath. I remember
that's pretty funny though. Like, you know what I mean? And you got to be able to have a laugh at yourself as well. That's the thing. Like I'll never stand anywhere and say, oh, you know, you can't criticize. Like that's what the greenies and the left is always like. They can't laugh at themselves, and they don't have the ability to have a sense of humor about the sort of dark humor that I think we all share, you know?
Yeah, I
that's
remember
that's the thing about like this whole political correctness. It's very anti-Australian. Like, you can't say, you know, if you say anything offensive, you're racist, sexist, homophobic. But in the sense, you're building a class of people who are so, everyone has to be on eggshells around them. And if anyone says the wrong thing, they're like gonna snap because they're trained to be like, oh my God, that's like over the limit. You've just said that joke. But it's like
microaggressions.
We all need thick skin. Like if a black person gets called a nigger, or a Jew, or a Christian gets insulted, a white man gets insulted, it's not just justification for you to be violent or aggressive, overly aggressive, or snap. In my lifetime, and especially in concreting, you get hazed, you get shit put on you. They're testing your metal. They're seeing how thick the skin is. Are you gonna snap? Are you gonna rat? Can you handle it? Are you gonna be able to work longer than 2 days and quit? The dudes don't want to train you and put time into you, training you, if you're just gonna bugger off before the week's end. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's people that, I don't know, the people who invented political correctness are totally disconnected to this working class, blue collar, I don't know, like bogan.
You got to have the rough and tumble, right? You got to be able to take a bit of skin off. Like you can't. I remember, because my younger days, I lived out in Rokewood, which is like middle of nowhere boondocks, sheep farming, ex gold mining settlement in Victoria, south of Ballarat, and mum and dad still have 20 acres out near that way, and so I went to school there. It was a little school of like 80 people, and my first job was doing like rousing work on in the shearing shed. And I remember doing it with a couple of other guys, and I was kind of a pretty nerdy, I was a pretty nerdy kid and whatever. And they thought I would sort of fold and wilter and not be there for more than a day. And I remember the old shearer, he goes, as soon as you get a bead of sweat on your forehead, you'll be gone. But there were guys that were like the sort of big tough guys or whatever, and they fucked off and sort of flaked before I did. And the guy goes, you know what? He goes, you're a worker, I'll give you that. So,
man,
you got to, and those guys are like rough as anything, like, and if you can't sort of take a bit of a good natured, muck around, then they're not going to waste their time.
Mm-hmm. And there's something like to say, like, say I work with these tough blokes, and they're like, they wake up on the wrong side of the bed and are pissed off. They're on the verge of snapping already. And like, it's funny that when you say to them, like, like, oh, what'd you wake up? Fucking your boyfriend wasn't there, or something. Like, you say that and they're on the verge, and you say some homo, something horrible, and it actually like snaps them out of it, like out of that crappy mood. They'll just be like, oh, fuck up, idiot. And then you both laugh. You know what I mean? It's like this. That's what we do. That's what you do. This is the real world. We keep forgetting about these interactions, and we're like, lock it down. Lock them up. Well,
yeah, or lock them out, like with the under 16 social media ban. It's like, and you're right, we're going to be creating a generation of kids who are going to get to age 16, and it's going to be like, oh, now I can go and buy a legal beer or go and get my license. It's going to be like, oh, now I can get my social media license and I'll be unleashed on the world. But they're going to go into the wild west of the digital town square, and they're going to be hopeless. They're going to have no skills, and they're going to be super at risk of probably worse harm. You know what I mean? Because they won't have any idea of how to navigate it.
Mm-hmm. Some dude here, he's riling you up. He
Yeah,
said,
that's
I had a
what Sarah
similar
Hanson
background
Young
to Jordan,
said.
but I never.
Well, maybe you were just better than me. Maybe you just didn't get caught.
Yeah, he never got caught.
Mate, look, I'm an example. If you want to get into politics, anyone can. You know, it's funny. So, because our founding fathers, like probably, you know, Samuel Griffiths and all those sort of guys, you might know some of them. Half of them were like rebels against Irish Home Rule, and they were hardcore, right? Like they were pretty knock around guys. They weren't like prim proper politicians. And when they wrote our constitution, the constitutional convention debates beforehand, they talked about, oh, you know, how are we going to decide who can be a politician? And they sort of were talking about, you know, a criminal record or whatever. What difference should that make? Or should you be able to run as an MP if you've got a criminal background? And they were having this big debate, and they were saying, oh, you know, we're going to make it so if you do over 2 years in prison or whatever, you can never be a politician. And that's what it is at the state levels. But at the federal level, the Constitution actually says, unless you're in prison serving a sentence, or unless you actually are waiting for a sentence, you're good to go. So that's why Pauline could do some time in prison. Darren Hinch could do some time in prison, and they're still able to run for federal politics.
Pauline was exonerated, though.
She was ultimately exonerated, but the wording of the Constitution actually says you're being like subject to or under sentence is the wording. And Samuel Griffiths got up in the middle of this debate and he said, gentlemen, may I remind you that half of you are rebels against Irish Home Rule and the British think of you as criminals. And everyone goes, oh, yeah, we probably shouldn't do that.
I think it's worth remembering as well, Jordan, that just because a lot of the sitting politicians have not been charged with criminal offences, that doesn't mean that their conduct throughout their lives has not been criminal. You know, just because you're yet to get caught, it doesn't mean you haven't perpetrated something which is significant enough to receive a prison sentence for.
Well,
and
not
there's
just
another
that.
argument to be made as well that says, you know, maybe to practice law, first you have to break the law so you can understand the judiciary entirely, and you have a lived experience, and you've been able to overcome something, and you've been able to recognize and observe the shortcomings within the law. And also some people that are prosecuted for things and receive a prison sentence that perhaps isn't worthy. It's not necessary for them to do a prison sentence to be reformed as well. There's plenty of crimes that people do time for. That time is meant to sort them out, but in fact, that time inside only serves to enhance their criminality when they come back out into the free world, right?
Yeah, that's definitely true. They say prison is the criminal university, you know, and if you don't have contacts and you're not a sort of a drug dealer when you go into prison, you often pick that up when you get out. But yeah, look, I think that there are a lot of politicians in Canberra who are basically stealing from Australians every day, you know, through inflation, through spending on crazy excessive waste, through the size of government. You know, they're not sorry. They don't, you know, they're not trying to make amends, or they don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're on the gravy train until they retire, and then it's someone else's problem, and that someone else will be our kids.
And they also know very well how to skirt the law. They have legal representation that allows them to weave between the law.
Dan Andrews was the master at that, spinning his way out of everything.
Yeah, and you know, it's like rules for thee, but not for me. You know, selectively enforced laws, that's probably the most unjust thing you could have, because it creates this two-tier society where if you've got the right connections, you've got enough money, you can sort of treat certain things and certain laws as if they don't apply to you. But for a long time, I don't know if you know this, Dusty, but for a long time, the drug buses, they wouldn't test for cocaine. Like they could, but they didn't, because that's what all the, you know, AFL players and judges and, you know, everyone that has the money to afford that, you know, they don't want to be pulling them over and fining them and stuff. But
yeah. And now you wouldn't even like, I wouldn't even do cocaine because it might have fentanyl.
Oh, mate, yeah, like,
so like, you know what I mean? Like,
I know 100% what you mean.
When I was 18, and I was so fucking high on weed and drunk, and I think I was taking ecstasy, so I was off my face, having a great time. I did a line.
You did it all.
I didn't even know the particular feeling of cocaine. So it's like I pretty much classify it. I may have tried it, but I can't recognize the feeling of it, so I don't even know. But like, then someone might say, "Oh, you should try that. Don't you want to have that experience?" And now I'd be like, "No, I just don't. I wouldn't try it." A big fear would be because of fentanyl. You don't know what the fuck's in it. And I'm a Christian. I don't want to do that shit. And I don't think you should fuck around with things that, if you have an addictive personality. I don't particularly, but
yeah. And look, I definitely do. And it's a double-edged sword. Like, I'm the sort of person who's going to go hard on whatever I do, and I'm going to be a million miles an hour and super, super, fifth gear all the time. That's just how I'm wired, and I've sort of learned to correct for it, and I've sort of learned to apply it to.
So you just lock in on something positive, and then
exactly. And the way I used to describe it is, it's like if you've got a gun that the sight's off, you learn to shoot to adjust to the sights, right? Like you'll just aim, and over time how to correct for the particular weapon firing.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, and that's what when I got out of prison. That's what I realized, that my personality and my temperament lent itself to some pretty dark parts, And look, Blue Pilled in the chat, he doesn't care what I say. He's decided he's made a particular judgment about me or whatever, and that's okay.
Yeah,
and pre-2015, the person I was a piece of shit. He's 100% right. That time in my life and those things I did are something that can't be excused.
And you've repented. You've literally repented. You've changed.
Yeah, but like, if you believe that a human being is the sum of the worst things they've ever done in their life, then it's a bit like, like he is without sin cast the first stone, isn't it? You can't stand there and say, I'm perfect, therefore anyone who's ever fallen short of that standard.
When I was like 17, 16, it was like, my circle of mates were like, a mate of mine would smoke pot before school. He dropped out. He became a meth addict. He murdered someone. You know what I mean? The week before he murdered someone, we were smoking pot together. And like, a mate of mine, we joyrided his mum's car Thursday night. Friday night, he joyrided a car again, crashed the car, killed the passenger. Me brother and me mate went out on the beers, got in a punch on, turned to like a guy threw a pot plant at my brother's head, almost killed him, and my brother's mate like grabbed a chair and smacked the dude with the chair, and then he ended up going to jail for grievous bodily harm. Now, for me, around that time, someone invited me to church, and I was like, man, I need to change my environment, and I'm open to try anything new. Now, look, I believe this. All my mates who had horrible things like that happen, I could see that I could have made a similar choice like that, and my life could have gone down a dark road. Now, I don't tell them stories to judge my mates. I see myself, and many young people can easily make foolish choices. So we have to, and then we have to have wisdom. We have to recognize that we all have that potential to do stupid stuff, and we have to be around wise people and good mates, and recognize our own weaknesses, like you're saying, readjust. I'm a bit out of focus, so I've got to readjust. I've got to realize my strengths and weaknesses, be honest, and position yourself wisely. Yeah,
100%. I think there's a couple of things you've said in there that I totally agree with, and that's the insight and wisdom within yourself to know yourself and to know when you're not right and when things are starting to go off the path. And that's something that really, some people have it naturally from a young age, and they just have that natural insight or wisdom. That's really rare. I think most men, especially most young men, don't gain that until they're quite a bit older, especially relative to women. I think that's just the way it is. Young, dumb, and full of cum, they say. Like, I think most young men don't really grow up and become a man until they're probably 25, 26.
Yeah.
For me, it was 27. That's when I went to prison. And I was still at 26 and a half, 26. I was still someone who just didn't accept responsibility for my life. I was just there for a good time and didn't want to hear. And then the second thing you said is the people around you. And that's something I used to surround myself with people who would just agree with me and say everything I wanted to do was great. And I didn't want to be surrounded by people who would pull me up and say, hang on, mate, you're being a dickhead, or you're really, running hot here. You got to cool your jets. Like I just wouldn't have had people like that around me because I didn't want to know. You know what I mean? Whereas now I value people who will say, even people in the chat who are giving me, a hard time or have criticisms, whatever. It's good to have people around you who are going to check you, keep you humble, and sort of tell you things you don't want to hear from time to time. So, and that's something that you probably learn as you get older too, but it's also about being selective with the people you do call your mates, because what I learned through my experiences is there's a whole lot of people in your life who you call your friend and they say they're your friend, but when you can't do anything for them and you've got nothing and you're at rock bottom, and it's hard to be there for you and to be a mate, there's a lot of people who evaporate pretty quick.
I have like a theory, I carried on like a child. Pardon?
We've got Maddie Stack in the waiting room.
I'll chuck him in, and I'll tell my story, and then I'll chuck him in. I carried on like a teenager until I actually had kids of my own. I had my first son at 32. Now, because we've this is a problem. I think it's a problem that the libertarians can address, because you're gonna fix the cost of living, and you're gonna reposition the economy so people could get married and have kids and buy a house younger, and get back to, if we're married, buying houses and having children when we're 25, 22, maybe that's more in line with the natural order of things. I was 32. I carried on like a teenager for longer. And it wasn't until I had children that I was radically changed my life and thinking and attitude on so many layers, you know what I mean? And
your missus is switched on as hell. She runs a tight ship. I've met her, and she's an impressive woman. She keeps you in line, which is good.
Yeah. I'm a lucky man.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I'm a lucky man too. My wife's fucking MVP of my life and the campaign. She's a weapon.
Nah. Let's bring on another dad, Matty J. Stagg. He's one of the wisest mates I know, and he's a member of the Libertarian branch of Ipswich.
Matty, how are you, mate?
You're good, mate. I didn't know that the Swole Patrol was on the loose, Ditloff, mate. Those guns are looking sick. Have you, mate? You've got to go to the vet. Those puppies are looking absolutely sick.
Yeah, like I said, this is an unplanned drop in. My campaign team, if they're watching, I'm sorry, the singlet's probably not approved or whatever. But I thought, look, if I'm going to join Thirsty Thursdays with the Dusty Bogan, I've got to wear my training singlet. So
now I have to say it, mate. I'm not sure if you've copped a fine or not, because I'm not sure if you've got a license for those guns of yours.
Mate, I'm a libertarian. Good people break bad laws. I'm not going to need a license.
I know that Joel Jamala's done videos, or they're mainly just impromptu sort of streams with a singlet on. I don't know if he's sort of trying to impress some viewers.
Boy, Jordan, did you see the guy in Western Australia, and he built an underground safe shooting range?
Yeah, that was crazy. That was wild. That looked like such a good man.
Guns, all this crazy stuff.
I saw that and I thought, that is bloody awesome. But what I also thought, and I don't know if you thought this as well, I thought, who ratted him out? Because there's no way they would have worked that out. That's just my brain, because I know I got lagged on. That's how I went to prison basically for the drug stuff. But I thought number one on Western Australian Senate ticket for the Libertarians. Yeah, look, we've got to find this man. We've got to get him out of prison and say, look, once you've done your time, come and let us know. I'm kidding. I shouldn't joke about that.
So did they throw him in jail for that?
I don't know.
I don't think he went to jail.
Good. Well, I'm glad he didn't. But the WA, they are one of the few states that still do have good gun rights, and the WA police are terrified. Like they doxed a whole heap of lawful firearm owners. I don't know if you saw that. They basically released this map, like a visual map from air or satellite or whatever, and they just had all these houses marked to illustrate how many guns there were. But people were able to actually work out where those places were, and a whole heap of people got guns stolen and all that sort of stuff. It's just crazy. The WA police are
that idiot.
We actually had a shooting here just about 2 days ago in Ipswich, and I actually had a bunch of people, including a counsellor, actually get a bit pissed off at me, because what happened was there was a bloke in Bundamba who illegally held a gun, and he actually invaded someone's home in Ripley. So he actually attacked and tried to rob a 71-year-old granddad who defended himself with a clock. So the granddad was living out at Ripley, and he held up a metal clock to stop this bloke shooting him, and he ended up getting a bullet in the arm. And they found the bloke out at Bundamba with an illegal firearm. And I was kind of like surprised, because people were like, well, I thought criminals didn't have guns. But the reality was, like, the gun buyback, like, imagine a criminal following the law.
Yeah,
like it's an oxymoron.
100%. Like, and this is the thing: no criminal who wants a gun doesn't have one. It's like saying nobody who wants weed or MD or whatever. Anyone who wants anything on the black market can get it. That's the very nature of it. It's just going to cost you more or be a bit harder to find or whatever. It doesn't. The laws don't stop bad people who don't care about the law from doing what they want.
Hey Jordan, just on that, then a quick point. So we could make fentanyl legal tomorrow, as well as heroin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, reasonable people with common sense, people who understand how destructive those two substances are, regardless of its legality, we wouldn't go out and partake in its use, even if it was freely available.
Yeah, 100%.
So I know that may be an extreme example of what you're touching upon there, but this is what we're sort of grappling with. And I guess that ties into the entire libertarian philosophy as well. Like, we could make certain things legal. They would be destructive for wider society, but we would afford people the freedom and not punish good people because bad people do things.
Well, here's the thing: what's the most harmful drug in Australia? Bloody alcohol. And that is.
I'll drink for that.
And that's not a criticism of anyone who wants to have a drink. I haven't had a drink in nearly 10 years. That's part of my recovery, that I just can't. Like, I got to be totally abstinent, because drinking was never the worst problem, but it was always the first problem. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be a few beers in, and the next minute I'd be at Revs, and 3 days later, like, that's
You're married to a stripper. Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, well, but no one would look at me twice if I walked into a bottle in the middle of the day and just ordered a slab. Like, nobody would care. Nobody would stop me. But that might do immense damage. And there's people that go and have a lot of smokes and all that sort of stuff as well. And it's like, that's legal. It's bad for you, but you should be free to do things that are bad for you. You should be free to take risks, because if you're not allowed to take risks, you're not going to learn and grow. And also, you're probably going to want to do those things more than you would. And that's to your point, Benny. I reckon you're right. We're sort of infantilizing people, and it feeds back into what Dusty was saying, that you can't curate a reality that's free of risk and sanitized and sort of this, PG version of reality, because all that does is it means that the margins where all that stuff is happening get way more dangerous. And
it facilitates a learned helplessness as well, right? Whereas 100%. Government is daddy, government is the boss. And I guess that ties in a little bit to what Thomas Sowell wrote about when he was the African-American author as well, ladies and gentlemen, not somebody else of the same name.
I think you just said Thomas Sowell.
But the soft bigotry of low expectations. People fall into holes because they don't give a shit, first and foremost, about themselves, and then society deals with those repercussions. So if individuals can take control of their own lives a little bit better, be more responsible, particularly when they're out in public, whatever they do in the comfort of their own home, that's up to them, right? But once they go outside, we have a duty of care.
Can I actually want to share a personal story with you, Benny, and I want to get your opinion on it. So I'm 33 years old. I'm a happily married father of 3 kids. I run my own business. I pay a mortgage, so the bank owns the house. I don't own the house yet, sadly. But when I was 20, I had a girlfriend, and we broke up at the time. And I was trying to crack onto this other girl who happened to be a gypsy. Ironically, Jordan, who used to work as a bartender at Revs too. And this is 2012, right? And she was like, "Oh, if you want to come out and hang with my mates, let's go to this bush doof." And I had no idea what a bush doof was, right? Go out to a bush doof. I'm still 20 years old. and it was my first time trying MDMA. And I go out there and I took Dusty would probably know what I'm talking about. And I took a shit ton of MDMA. And there was a period in my life, right, where for about 6 months, every weekend, like I'd leave work on a Friday, and then I'd hop on my motorbike and I'd go straight out to the bush stuff on a Friday night. And there'd be like MDMA, like mushrooms, like you'd literally like they'd have a bush stuff where the mushrooms are growing and just go like pick them. It was absolutely wild, right? And like I met fucking Captain Hook, I met Infected Mushroom, I met all these 6 Psytrance DJs. Like it was a wild 6 months, right? But what happened, right, for me was about 6 months after this, and when I was 21, I remember I was out at a bush stuff called Samsara, and I was 20, and I was 21, and I'm around all these bunch of like gypsies wearing all my crazy like Nepalese colorful like bush stuff gear, and this woman comes past us, and she was about she'd be in her 50s, and she was like homeless living in a van, and this is in 2012, and she was like homeless living in a van, and she was like going around to all of us who were like the same age as her kids, and she was like basically trying to scab dope off everyone. And I had this moment to me, and I'm like, there's this old woman who's trying to scab dope at a bush store because she's so broken poor, and she's so burnt out, and just looks like she's aged terribly. And I remember I had this moment where I'm like, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to end up like her in about 10 years time. And I remember it was like overnight. I'm like, I'm never going to a bush stuff again. Like I'm 100%. Like I haven't touched MDMA or any drugs since then, but for me it was only 6 months, and it's kind of like ties into what Jordan said, where it's like you have to take a risk, because now I can look back on that and I can say, like, I know what it's like, and I know what I was getting into, and I know what kids are going to be getting into because I was getting into it. But at the same time, it was kind of like I had my wits about myself, but it was at the expense of someone else, like this old woman, for me to actually snap out of that experience to say what I'm doing is probably not a good path. And then obviously I changed where I was going in life. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that.
Is that to Dusty, or is it to me, or just
probably to everyone, actually. I don't know whether anyone else has had a similar story.
I just want to let you know that was my mum, bro. No.
To your question, there's a very strong argument to be made that how do you shock kids out of not following a trajectory of destruction? And one example would be you should take children when they're 11, 12, 13 years of age, possibly with a school group. It would be a school excursion, and you would take them to Junkie Town in whichever capital city the school resides in. And you would be able to have the children walk the streets and see junkies lying in the street, people off their heads on heroin, on the nod, as it were, or whatever it may be, screaming at their missus, rah, 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 doing all the crazy stuff that they do, and say, look, children, heroin makes people feel good, but it also makes you like this. And you might also murder your grandmother for her last $50 to purchase heroin to end up like this as well. And lots of parents would say, no, we don't want to expose our children to this. But hang on a second, there's a deterrent factor there. So that's one element. The other element with the bush stuff, people have been there and done things like that. But Maddie, what you were describing was a phase in your life, a discovery phase, right? But you had your wits about you enough to realize that after you saw her at the final stage, you're like, dude, I don't want to be her. I definitely don't want to be married to her as well. So I don't want to end up with a chick like that. So what am I going to do? I've had my time. I've had my fun. And now you've transformed. So I think that's just a process of self-discovery. It's a phase that every individual goes through. And better at being MDMA in Bushdorf than ice in the back of a car with a group of criminals trying to rob 7-Elevens.
That's true.
Have we talking about this? And I know, like in Ipswich, so like we're kind of talking about a rite of passage, right? Having that time of going walkabout or a rite of passage. Now, like in Ipswich, I live in Ipswich. Guess what? I moved into Ipswich 14 years ago, and there was motorbike tracks, 4-wheel drive tracks everywhere. Now they're all barred up. And there's signs everywhere saying you can't ride a motorbike. You can't go 4-wheel driving. You now need a license to go fishing. like insane.
Yeah,
So
that's
like the culture of what blokes would do to blow off steam, like, you know, you could do, there used to be dudes doing burnouts and stuff around the industrial estates. Now that's all shut down. They've shut down the drift track at Archerfield, or they're trying to shut it down. And you're like, where are people going to do these crazy rite of passages under this? It's all part of the nanny state. You know what I mean? That's what Libertarian Party's against. But like, we've closed off the fishing and the motorbikes and the full driving and the drifting and the bloke stuff like that. And what are we leaving the kids with? Play video games. And now you can't use social media either. And we're just
But
closing
video
off
games are
every
okay.
fucking pathway for the rite of passage or the walkabout, the coming of age that we all go through, you know?
Well, I think they sort of almost want young men never to become men. Like they want to keep boys almost like effeminate pseudo men. You know what I
That's
mean?
the
Like,
modern education system.
yeah, it is. It is. It's like, because the worst thing you can be in the world, and you know, like, I don't say this to be, I'm not critical of women or anything like that. I'm just saying, to be a young man is to be trying to find your place in the world and to try to work out where you fit in and how to use the power you've got, because we do, as men, have a power physically, and not always just physically, sometimes emotionally, and in the dynamics and in the relationships we're in, we have a power that we need to learn how to use in a way that's not harmful. And it's like, you know, Jordan Peterson says the worst thing you can have is a weak man. But that's what our society is creating. It's creating weak men rather than safe men. You know what I mean? Like a man who can be dangerous but doesn't do those things because they have self-restraint and self-discipline. That's true safety, because you're actually with someone who can protect you and who can nurture you and who can be a leader when required.
Well, Jordan, just on that as well, just on that quickly, and it'll touch on Tim's point as well. So the modern philosophy, and it's been pushed through the curriculum, is that masculinity is bad, and so they umbrella term it as toxic masculinity, and they have to exterminate toxic masculinity. But the reality of the situation is, for all of us, because we're guys and we've been adolescents before, and we've hung around with our mates at school, we understand pecking orders and things like that as well, which is unspoken. Men just know that about other men when they walk into a room. You can feel that, or you can observe that pretty quickly. But there's an aggression which resides in us all, particularly in adolescence. And what we're trying to, I guess, discuss here more broadly is, are we able to tame and temper that aggression? And how soon can we do that? Because if we're unable to do so, it's going to wreak havoc not only in our lives, it's going to make victims in society as a result of our aggressive actions against them, where we're just having a night out with the boys and we get a bit loose and we might get involved in a few punch-ons and have a laugh about it. But we don't understand, by making a victim, that can ruin somebody's life in many senses. So this talk about extinguishing toxic masculinity, I think it's misguided. I think we should be teaching young men to be aware of their inherent aggression, to understand how to control that, and to find avenues like what Dusty was mentioning, how to blow off steam. If you keep them confined for a long time, they don't have outlets to blow off that steam, and therefore it always manifests in the most inappropriate times. Whereas, as you're saying, that the man who's in control of that, who is very, very dangerous still, but knows when to apply it and when it's warranted. Because, of course, violence is very necessary. It's very necessary for guys to be violent if necessary against other people who are being violent against the innocent. Because the only thing that's going to stop that violent person is a more violent person putting a stop to them pretty quickly. And so,
100%.
go on.
No, I was just gonna share an anecdote, like first a general comment and then a specific anecdote. When I was in prison, that's an environment where the consequences and the incentives are very real. Like, you know, you can't do and say the sort of things that you can these days say and do and expect to get away with it. You know, in society now, young men are kind of given this illusion that they can mouth off and can, you know, be very confident to the point of, you know, really disrespectful because they think that that's something that's not going to have consequences.
Jordan, on that, kids in school, boys in school are now telling their teacher in class in front of everyone, go and get or whatever. Or in some cases, they're laying hands on their teacher. And instead of that children being immediately removed from the school, expelled, there's a cancelling session which may take place. And then, well, what are the reasons why this young boy has done that? And what that does is that undermines the authority and sanctity of that teacher where the respect is no longer there.
But it's also the partnership between the teacher and the parents. Because once upon a time, the teacher would say, hey, this has happened. And the parents would say, right, that's not going to happen again. And then what would happen at home that the teacher wouldn't have anything to do with, the school wouldn't have anything to do with, is there'd be some correction. You know what I mean? Like I had more than one wooden spoon broken over my butt, and I never got one smack that I didn't deserve. You know what I mean? But what I was saying with the whole prison environment, you have to almost recalibrate to the wilderness. You know what I mean? Like, because the prison guards are there to keep you where you are, but they're not going to get involved and stop what happens. So it's a weirdly free society inside the prison. It's a very sort of almost anarchic sort of self-rule almost within. You know, as long as you are physically where you're meant to be, they don't really care what you do within those four walls. So it sort of is very much that sort of natural, wild sort of social dynamic and pecking order. And so you have to be very hyper aware of what someone's body language is, who's who you can say things to, who you can't, who you're sort of able to hang around with, who you're not. You know, like it goes back to that sort of instinctual, which we have within us, but we ignore and suppress. You know, like where we either lose it because we don't have to use it and we get soft and sort of it fades. Because kids, like you just said, at school, kids are super like that, where they know. But as adults, we sort of suppress it. But I had to relearn those things. But recently, it was actually after I got endorsed, and I'm sort of glad there's no CCTV on V-Line trains or whatever, because it was pretty full on. It was Anzac Day this year. I was coming back from Melbourne, and on my way up on the train, there was this Croatian guy and his son, and they were drinking on the way up. And I remember looking at them going, geez, they're going hard. They're going to get pretty loose later on. And then on my way back, about 8 hours later, because they'd obviously been at the footy, and on my way back, they were on the same train I was on, and they just were absolutely blotto. It was like the dad was just like abusing other passengers, hitting his kid, and not like sort of like disciplined sort of, you know, hands, like full on giving his son a real whack and giving him a belt. And like to the point where this old veteran pretty much came up to him and said, mate, like, you know, you can't do that. And he was sort of, this guy was so aggro and so drunk and obviously enraged or whatever, that he was like standing over this old veteran with medals and shit on coming back from Anzac Day. And at that point I was just like, because nobody was doing anything. There were all these people, and I'm just saying this by way of observation. I'm not saying this as any kind of comment, but there were big, strong black guys standing around just doing nothing, just watching this guy be, you know, abusive and racist. And like, he was just carrying on like unchecked. And all these big, tough, hard people were just standing around looking at their phones, just, you know, intentionally not acknowledging the situation or taking any responsibility for it. And I just sort of made eye contact with this other guy who looked like he was pretty rough and ready. And he and I just made eye contact and sort of just nodded almost imperceptibly, whatever. And I walked up to this guy and I said, as the train was coming up to the next station, I said, mate, you're off here. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you're getting off the train. And he's like, what? And this other guy sort of went up to him and said, mate, you're getting off. He turned to face the other guy, and I basically went around behind him and got him in the rear naked, just threw him off when the train stopped. So basically, like, so we sort of just between unspoken, we didn't say a single word to each other during it or afterwards, me and this other guy. But we basically just handled the situation and dealt with it because there was just nobody else that was going to do it. But you have to, sometimes that situation is someone has to step up and actually do something. Not because it's like all about you and you want to be a hero or anything, but just because, like, if that hadn't happened, someone could have got really seriously hurt. And
it probably would have helped them button it up.
Yeah.
Like, that little interaction would have been like, I'm being a dickhead.
Yeah, well, like the person I felt worst for was the son, because he got off, like, basically we threw the dad off, and then the son obviously had nowhere else to go and got off with the dad. And I thought to myself, he's going to get a hiding because his dad's just been unmanned in front of the whole train carriage.
Was the son a teenager or a boy? Or
teenager? Yeah, like, so sort of like maybe 16. But yeah, it was just, and they were both drunk, but it was just clear that it was just going to end badly when they got home. But like
Essendon supporters, Jordan. Essendon supporters on Anzac
I'm not
Day,
gonna,
mate. You got to watch out for them, bro. They're going to act like that quite a bit.
yeah.
You're thinking of Collingwood supporters, Benny.
My point is, you know what I mean. My point is that people will always say it's someone else's responsibility, or what's the government going to do about it? And it's like people would just wait around and watch disaster unfold and do nothing because they think it's someone else's problem. And that's the real cultural problem of government overreach, is it crowds out private thought and private responsibility, like it has to. Anything the government, and this is another good example with the under 16 social media restrictions. It's telling parents, don't worry, the government's going to take care of it. You don't need to supervise your kids. The internet's going to be safe until they're 16, and then they're running around mad as lorries. But like, it's breeding that mentality where something that previously was a parental responsibility is now crowded out, and now the state has responsibility for that.
And of course, exempt platforms such as gaming, they still carry the same potential harms that Facebook and Snapchat
if you've ever been in a
Instagram do.
yeah, if you've ever been in a Call of Duty lobby, mate, that's savage. The kids, the 9-year-olds, are friggin' like, they'll make you cry.
And that's actually where the most death threats take place.
Bloody oath.
In gaming chat rooms, right? It's the most hardcore talk. And a lot of the time, and teenage boys, they would deliberately group up against an adversary, and it's still a character in the game, but an adversary that they know personally. And they will snipe him as much as possible and annihilate him and destroy him as graphically as possible as well. They won't do it in the real world, of course.
The old teabagging, that's.
Have you guys ever heard of the cyberbullying that happens in Microsoft Flight Simulator of all games? So do you know what? So do you know what they do? Right? So when Microsoft Flight Simulator came out, so it's meant to be like a really like a milquetoast game, where it's meant to be like a realistic game where you're meant to fly planes and go from airport to airport, right? So they use like Google Earth as like an overlay so you can fly around. The most popular destination on Flight Simulator is Epstein Island, which of course it is. But what happens, right? What happens, right, is people. So apparently, the cyberbullying in Microsoft Flight Simulator is someone will get some kid's house, and they'll fly a plane into his house, take a screenshot, and then send it to the kid. Like that's the cyber. Like that's the extent. Like I played GTA 5 10 years ago. Like and I know exactly what online forums are like, but it's like the amount of cyberbullying and like exactly as everyone says here, like the stuff that you hear and the things that people say, the fact that it's extended to something as milquetoast and mundane as Flight Simulator is insane. It's like the least likely game to have cyberbullying, and somehow someone figured out how to shoehorn it in there.
Have you guys ever seen the Spanian? The guy who's like the ex-crewman, sort of does all that shade sort of stuff. He does these, or he did. This was a couple of years ago. He used to do like videos of him live streaming him playing Flight Simulator, but it was him flying around New South Wales doing like a tour of all the prisons. Because it's all geosat, and he'd be like, "Oh, now this is this prison. This is this about this yard," and he'd be like fully doing like a guided tour of New South Wales prisons in his plane in the Flight Simulator. It's the funniest content I've ever seen because it was just so like specific, and he was just so serious about it. It was great.
But Jordan, he's also a reminder for yourself, mate, and for some of the people in chat that wish to denigrate you still today, although you've paid your price to society, as it were. There's a redemption arc there with Spanian. Now, he was involved in violent crime and other things, much very different to what you're involved in, right? And some people would have with more destructive repercussions for the people who were victimized in that sense. With a physical trauma almost, but there's a redemption arc there for him, and he's now reformed in that sense, and he's having a positive impact. So for anyone trying to denigrate Jordan, I'll just ask you, well, what are your skeletons in your closet? The great thing about a politician who's able to say, look, these are the bad things that I've done, is because he's going to wear his heart on his sleeve from that point forward. And you know what the attacks are that are going to come at you, the coordinated attacks from those who oppose you, particularly in media or other political parties that feel threatened by you. And it almost reminds me of the final scene in 8 Mile with Eminem when he's in the battle. And the guys are going to come at him, and they're going to come at him hard. And he gets up there first, and he says, "These are all the things about me." And then at the end of it, he throws the mic and is like, "Tell the crowd something about me. I've already just told them everything." And when the guys get up to actually battle against him, they've got nothing to say because all they had was low-hanging fruit. Now, if you wish to sink the boots into someone when they're in their lowest moment, well, that's not the mark of a true man, and that doesn't demonstrate to me character. Character is the ability to overlook a man's faults and see in him the good things that he's got ahead of him and the potential in that individual. Because if we don't do that, well, there's no hope for any of us because we're all going to fall short at some stage.
And we also end up with leaders who have never failed because they've never tried. And that's I think that's the essence of what's wrong with what we have in Canberra now is we've got these people who have never been tested, and then they get into a position of great power, and you find out what sort of man they are once they've already got that control and power. And then, unfortunately, a lot of the time, the sort of people who seek that power out and thrive through the major party political systems are the last people you want to have that power and control. So, yeah, no, I totally agree. And like I was in Canberra last week for a couple of days, and yeah, it's a shit place. Like, it's a shit place. And if you ever, like in future, whether I'm elected or not, whatever, if you ever hear me say anything else about Canberra, that's time for me to retire. You know what I mean? Like, I got back from Canberra, and I felt like an Ace Ventura scene where he, realizes he's kissed the bloke and he has to shower, like scrub himself. It's just a cesspool. Like when they say the swamp, it's like you can feel it. It's like an alien planet. All these people that just have no sense of reality or connection to the real world. So,
and also the architecture is very cold and drab. It's like Soviet Russia back in the day, the government buildings that they built back in the day and everything as well, just drab, not aesthetically pleasing in that sense. Fair enough, there's some nice gardens, there's not too much traffic there, they've got massive roundabouts. I get all of that. But Jordan, Canberra, the National Press Club, is there going to be an opportunity, or have they reached out to anyone from the Libertarian Party to make a presentation at the National Press Club? Because I think that would be wonderful.
It would be wonderful. But I mean, the National Press Club, I reckon there's a couple of invites that we'll probably only get once. I reckon Q&A on ABC. If I ever get on that, it's going to be a one and only. And there's a couple like that where I don't think they really want to know what we have to say. But I think too many people get on those opportunities and they think, I've got to make the most of my moment. If I ever get an opportunity on anything like that, I'll just go full Harvey and Malay and just use it as a highlight reel and just rip shreds out of them, because they're not going to like you. They're not going to agree with you. They're all raging communists. So you might as well, get your kicks in while you're there.
Well, the easiest one to do right there, and this will be the last thing. So the easiest one to do on Q&A is the first remark you make when Patricia puts the question to you, Jordan, what's your view on this? And say, well, Patricia, when was the last time you voted LNP?
No, it'd be like, Patricia, my view on this is the ABC should be defunded. None of us should be here. That's what I'll say. And watch me never get invited back.
Are you going to give it? I pay your salary. I pay your salary, my taxes. How dare you? Yeah.
Boy, I reckon we'll wrap it up because But Jordan, you're a legend, mate. So you're in Victoria. You're running as number 1 or number 2 on the Senate?
Number 1 on the Senate ticket.
Number 1 on the Senate. And you've got a good history of Libertarians getting elected down there. So
yeah, in Vic, that's probably our best shot. Babbitt got up with 4%. If we get 5 to 7%, we're pretty well off the judges' scorecards then on the night. So, but yeah, there should be. I'll give you a heads up just before we wrap up. Tomorrow's Australian, the Oz newspaper. I reckon our ex-Liberal campaign membership stuff will be in there. They've done a bit of a write-up, so that'll make Peter Dutton choke on his cornflakes tomorrow, hopefully.
Nice, beauty. Yeah. I mean, me and Benny, we went down to Melbourne, maybe 2 months ago. Oh,
you didn't tell me you were there, you piece of shit.
I think you were in Tassie, actually.
Oh, right, okay, that'd be right.
You were in Tassie. I did message her, and you're like, unfortunately, I'm not in town.
You were rolling with Tim that day as well.
Yeah, Tim picked us up.
It was a FIFO at the March for the Babies.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, I was in Taz. I was hitting up Louise Elliott. Hopefully, she's going to be our lead Senate candidate down in Taz. So that'd be bloody great. She's a weapon.
Look, like from a Queenslander coming to Melbourne, it looked like a beautiful city, plenty of like brand new high-rise buildings. And I said to Tim, I said, there's so many big, beautiful buildings here. They all look built within the last 5 to 10 years, maybe half of the skyline. But I said, how many could a teacher, a police officer, firefighter or a tradesman afford to buy an apartment in any of these? You know what I mean? And I think like it is a scary thing that we're going through as a nation right now, that young, even like frontline workers or blue collar working class people couldn't afford, really struggle to afford what would be just a shit property you would struggle to buy right now. It's a huge problem. And I think the libertarians could, what would be the thing this is my number one concern. I think mass migration has driven that, it's supply and demand, and we haven't built enough properties. And
yeah, absolutely.
What's the answer?
I mean, it's a two-pronged answer, and it's three-pronged really. You've nailed the two elements that people are really familiar with on the head, where you've got a mass migration system that is being used to cook the economic books. We're in 7 quarters now straight of recession. If it was a per capita basis, where you're actually measuring based on per person, per head, our economic productivity, but instead they're just looking at total GDP. And so every time they bring new people in, there's like a sugar hit initially, but they're just chasing that constant growth to try to basically tell us that we're not in a recession when we absolutely are. So look, libertarians oppose mass migration, probably for different reasons than many people, many people in One Nation and NSN guys and others oppose mass migration on sort of cultural grounds, from a sort of a white racial narrative or a nationalist narrative. Libertarians look at it from the point of view of we need somebody. We need somewhere to live. We need migration that benefits the existing society. That's the social contract. You know what I mean? We need the best people migrating. We need the Elon Musks of Australia migrating here. We don't need people who are going to be parasitic and not contribute. And so the incentives are what we need to fix. We need to get rid of the broken migration system, the migration quota system. It's basically a government-run command and control program.
Government controls all of the economic levers: immigration, housing, infrastructure.
Yeah, bloody oath. And so there's that side of things. There's also how easy we make it to access the welfare state when people come here as permanent residents. People can get onto Centrelink and Medicare within 2 years. That's way too soon. It should be probably even out to 10 years to get citizenship. Things like that. We've got as a country, we're somewhere that people really want to come and live. We've got a premium, situation, and we need to be treating it like that, and really making the incentives so that the right people are coming. So that's one part of it. Then we've got the supply, like you say, that the actual new houses being built. It's just being absolutely suffocated by NIMBY councils, by over-regulation in the building sector, all of those things. But the third pillar, which a lot of people miss, is the fact that the government is channeling all this money, resources, and labour and trade unions and engineers into these government projects, these big builds. And if you're getting paid union money 3 times what a builder's labourer is getting paid to build a domestic home, why would you work on a domestic building site? So the government doesn't have a magical source of tradies and resources or whatever that they can draw from that doesn't take away from the normal market. You know what I mean? So the government doing all this stuff that they bill as, we're building the future and we're building infrastructure, it's just sucking away resources from what the market would want to do, which is build houses and build affordable housing. So that's the hidden thing that a lot of people miss, that the government's basically claiming they're benefiting us by building all this infrastructure, but they're actually distorting the market and stealing away resources from private enterprise. So those are the three things that libertarians can tackle all at once in a coherent way that will make the biggest difference in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah. Because I'm a concreter, and we hire a lot of, there's the Bogans, the high school dropouts, the immigrants who are just like brand new to the country. And like when I started concreting, you could afford all my workmates, regardless of who we were in our background. You could afford to buy a home in Ipswich. It was affordable on a concrete labourer's wage. And like now, we're busy. We're putting on new guys, and I could use to tell them, yeah, man, work hard. In 12 months, you'll be full time. Save your cash. Save that house deposit. Buy the house. Get the ring. Meet the woman. Get married. Have kids. Live in the Aussie dream. You know, and it might be some Samoan or Bogan or Filipino, and you could say that was the Aussie dream. And they were good work, and even still today, good guys, hardworking men. The Aussie dream, I can't tell them the Aussie dream. I can't say to these young dudes in my profession, yeah, mate, you can do it. It's this easy. The pathway, it just doesn't. The pathway is so much harder for me to articulate to them, to tell them a clear path forward. And I think to me, that is the biggest struggle I have. It makes me want to say, don't let one immigrant into the country. It makes me say that the government's absolutely failed us. I'm disgusted in them. And I don't want to have to say that. Like, honestly, I don't want to have to say it. I want it to be back 15 years where the Aussie dream was alive for all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I'm looking for, I think I want hope. I want to see things get back to that. Let's bring back the Aussie dream.
Hey, Jordan, just on that then as well. And Dusty is so right. So a generation ago, people, when they were purchasing homes, they were able to purchase a home. It wasn't always in the most affluent suburb, but they were able to get into the market just wherever they were in a typical suburb. And the cost of getting into a home in a typical suburb a generation ago was about 3 times their annual salary. And nowadays, it is 8 times the annual salary of an individual worker. How do we arrest that spiraling out of control, Jordan? Because that is so problematic. It's almost ridiculous. People are trying to save for close to a decade to now get a deposit, but the market is shifting so rapidly. They're now having to save for sometimes more than a decade as well, and they're going to be left out of the market. They're going to be priced out of the market regardless of where they purchase. So how can we? Of course, we're not going to be able to bring it back to 3 times the annual salary of individuals, but it's not sustainable for it to remain where it is.
No, it's definitely not. And like one of the accounts I really love on X, Rational Aussie, he calls it Ponzi, and it is, and because there's this bubble that there are a lot of people that profit from, and most politicians in Canberra have 2 or 3 investment properties, so they're individually profiting from it as well. I don't own my own home. My wife and I are pretty much reconciled to we're going to probably still be renting when we have kids, which is kind of fucked, really. You know what I mean? But it's hard because there's a whole generation of people, our parents' generation, who will have to suffer a drop in their value of their property in order to allow us to buy in. So that's the reality that no one wants to, I've got a lot of respect for Pauline and One Nation in a lot of their values, and we stand together in free speech and other things, but their take on like housing is like, oh, nobody can be worse off. The people who already have plenty of homes and investment properties, they can't have a drop in property value. Like everything must stay the same as it is for existing people, but for new people it has to be cheaper. You can't. That's not possible.
I think the mentality is changing now that falling house prices is a good thing now. I've noticed that.
Well, it's a good thing for the new people, but the part that sucks is that whoever's holding the bag when the music stops in the game of Pass the Parcel for Ponzi suffers. Like that, there is a loss at the bottom of the Ponzi when it breaks. When the bubble bursts, the people who are the last to buy lose the most. That's the nature of it. You can't avoid that. And I think we have to be prepared to take a bit of a hit to make sure that our kids and their kids can actually get in. And the government, like what they're doing with this, one of these bills that passed before, and I'm mindful, like Maddie, it's 10:37, whatever, we probably have to finish up. But like one of these bills they passed at the end of the sitting week last week, this Help to Buy. It's the government coming in and being a 38% equity shareholder in your property.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. You're never going to get out of that. It's like it's like having a property with organised crime. Like they own 38%, you own 2%, and the bank owns 60%. So it's like you're a 2% shareholder in your own home. And that's like helping you buy a home. Well, it's not really. It's helping you help the government buy social housing. That's literally the effect of it.
Yeah.
It's just madness. So everything the government does is still just propping up this bubble. So, we're going to have to burst the bubble, and that'll mean some pain. But
Well, Jordan, that problem is going to get worse as well, because now with a growing amount of single-parent homes and children raised by single parents as well, it's even harder for the single parent to be able to purchase a property. And that trend is obviously going up and up and up now as well.
Not just single parents, but single income families, where the traditional wife staying at home, looking after the kids, people who want to have that life, like they're basically priced out the same as if they were single parents, which is just not everyone should have to. Not everyone should have to do that. It shouldn't be like the only option. But if people do want to pursue that path, which I think is the better path for kids, they should be able to actually make those choices as well.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I interviewed Campbell Newman at CPAC, and it was like there was a time in Brisbane where people were like, "Don't buy a unit, don't buy a townhouse. The market is flooded," because Campbell Newman deregulated around all the train stations. He deregulated, lifted the zoning to 25 stories, 30 stories, and there was an oversupply in the market because he deregulated it.
Yeah.
And like, I would say if we can get to that point and we can deregulate some things, and we could bring an oversupply, even an oversupply in 50-meter 2-bedroom apartments, a young couple could be like, "Honey, let's," a cop and a teacher, a plumber and a nurse, and say, "Let's buy the 2-bedroom apartment." You get your foot in the market, and it could be affordable if we flood the market with 2-bedroom apartments. And then after 5 years, they can say, "Let's sell and buy the 3-bedroom townhouse," and that's achievable. And then you're in a position to have kids.
Yeah, 100%.
Down the road, they could keep the apartment and then buy the townhouse. And then you're in a position, eventually you could upgrade to the home. And you could, but we need to have the mechanism to get in the market at some level. We've got 2-bedroom apartments that are $700,000. You know what I mean? And it's insane. And I
it's
think
really funny you say that, because what Campbell did then in his state premiership, the Jacinta Allen Labor government in Victoria is now just starting to do around train stations.
Yeah.
They're starting to upzone and have that missing middle, even 6-10-story places around the residential, around the train stations. So, Campbell was so far ahead, and I think Queensland's still coasting on his efforts and his forward thinking. And it's the same thing with Victoria and Jeff Kennett. Like you need those leaders who are prepared to make some sacrifices and tell people, like, no, you can't have everything. We're going to have to take a loss here. We're going to have to tighten our belt or sacrifice. So I think that's the way to go. But thanks for having me, gents. It's I'm stoked to have finally been able to join you on a Thirsty Thursday.
No worries, mate. Anytime, you're more than welcome, and we hope you have a win. I'm a member of the Libertarian Party, so I'm absolutely biased. And I encourage everyone, you guys have branches, so people could join a community of, people who are, I think in the Libertarian Party, you're not afraid to think about the problems and discuss them openly and come up with solutions. And you're not tied to the traditional solutions. You're like, in our branch in Ipswich, we can talk about things we do openly, and it's great. I appreciate it. I think it's a great community. I tell people to join their local branch. Get on it. Isn't membership like half price right now, or free?
No, so for ex-Liberal Party members who are defecting across, it's free. But check it out. Actually, talking of that, I've just sent Tim in the private chat. I've just sent you an archive link The article from the Australians just dropped for tomorrow's paper. So we've got that ex-Liberal membership front and centre there in the Australian, and we've got quotes from me. The Libertarians' lead Senate candidate for Victoria, Jordan Ditloff, said the scheme was designed to attract disillusioned Liberals and showcase to that party there was an alternative. The Achilles heel they have is a vulnerability of their membership. It's dawning on the Liberals that the days are over where they can take their base for granted, former young Liberal Mr. Ditloff said. Declining to release the full number of former Liberals who had taken up the offer, Mr. Ditloff said hundreds had since signed up and more had taken out full party membership. It's got Malay in there as well. That's sick.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's wild. Excellent.
Oi, we'll end on this. Do you know the band? Thanks everyone for coming. Everyone get follow Benny and Matty J Stagg and Tim and Jordan on Twitter. The band, the Chats. You all know the Chats, you know. I'm on Smoko, so leave me alone. I was listening to one of their other songs the other day, and it's like, the price of smokes have gone up again. The price of smokes have gone up again. And it says, the bastards in Canberra should be hung by the neck. And they just scream into that. They're like screaming about hanging politicians. I thought it was like such an Aussie bogan, great song. And it's kind of in the, you know, we're much more respectful than that. But the Chats are great Australian iconic band. And they, you know, the price of smokes are going up again, Jordan. We're not fucking happy about it, mate. Please do something about it when you get elected.
I will. Don't worry about that. We'll put organised crime out of business.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for tuning in. Any last words?
Thanks for hosting the Thursday show, boys. Yourself and Tim doing remarkable.
Was I the only one who was actually drinking tonight?
No, I had some homebrew here.
Yeah.
I was having a Scotch and Coke, but
yeah,
I was doing that to make up for Jordan not having anything for 10 years. So I was drinking for 2.
I said at the beginning of the stream, I deliberately drank these sweet Bilson's Tangle to stick it up those New South Wales liquor bureaucrats and their dream to ban fruity, sweet alcohol.
No, I think it'll be fantastic, Jordan. And yeah, I wish you very well in your endeavors, man. And if you get across the line, I think it's going to be remarkable. And I see some big things happening. If you're ruffling feathers when you're there, you're doing the job correctly.
Totally agree. This will be, I reckon, my win condition, I think, is if I can get them to punch down and sort of have a go at me. That's win condition right there. Because, yeah, and hopefully that will happen.
And ask them all if they're willing to take a pay rise for the benefit of Australians so they're not so detached anymore. Just ask it very broad. Are you willing to take a pay rise? Are you willing to take a pay cut? Are you willing to take a pay rise? Are you willing to take a pay cut? And find out where they're at. That'll go over very well and it'll provide you a viral moment.
All right.
And
see you guys.
Speaking, and as well as that, actually, Jordan, is one more thing, Jordan, as well. If you want to catch up with old mate Purple Pingers, he's out at a protest in Dandenong, out in front of the Woolies distribution centre. Mate, just go meet him. There's about 50 communists. They're all in the one place at the one time. Just take them on, mate, with those guns of yours. Just go straight.
I'll just go through and start filling shelves. I'll just be a scab. I'll just break their blockade and just single-handedly return Woolies to profit.
No, well, if he's not at home, you simply go to his residence and you capture his residence and then you put his residence up on his own website.
Look, I will say that there's a little little troll movement of maybe trying to get his yellow crime scene vacant home things and just putting them on communist stores, and so people just rock up and start squatting.